everybody. Welcome to a St. Patty's Day Election Day edition of Can't Wait. Sounds terrible. That's Patrick. That's Eleni. Producer Grace is behind the scenes. And guys, when I grew up in Chicago, this synergistic Election Day, St. Patrick's Day would happen from time to time. And it was like a high holy day growing up in Chicago in the, let's face it, the 70s and the 80s. You know, we had machine politics still at its high point, and you had people running around in green, going to parades, drinking green beer. It was like a holy day, especially growing up in Chicago, son of an Irish cop. But later, Eleni, I think you could relate to this. Working in the media as a reporter, Election Day became like standing in line for the longest Disney ride ever, because nothing happens till like 8, 9 o'clock at night, maybe. And it's pretty anticlimactic most of the time. And on the times when the races are really close, they're not even decided on Election Day.
Yeah,
Oh,
pretty brutal nowadays. The waiting game. Sometimes it's weeks long before we know the answers. So hopefully it's not too
indeed.
bad tonight.
Well, we've been complaining about the political ads, Patrick, and hopefully we're going to get a respite, although it will be brief because they'll be back up on the air soon enough. But unfortunately, they work.
Ain't that the truth? I mean, it is. I think we've seen some of the best. Like as political communicators, I think we all view election season as an opportunity to witness stuff. But I think we've seen some of the best forms of aggressive campaigning here in Illinois, which we don't always get a chance to. So it was our opportunity to observe that recently.
It's pretty insane charges based on flimsy hearsay. So we have a lot to be proud of this election season, including Eleni. In the closing minutes of the campaign, one of the two people vying to pull off the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate seat being opened up by the retirement of Senator Dick Durbin is Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. Although, as some previous lieutenant governors have pointed out, that they should be referred to as governor in person, but Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton made some hay in the last weekend of the campaign of pamphlets that were being handed out at Operation Push around the time of Reverend Jackson's death, listing her as one of the endorsed candidates of Operation Push. But the Jackson family said that was released in error. That's their story. They're sticking to it, Eleni. Obviously, there are 2 black women in that race. Congresswoman Robin Kelly is sort of in the second position, if you believe the polls. So there was more time for Lieutenant Governor Stratton to be on the defensive as to whether she claimed the endorsement of the dead Reverend without actually being endorsed by the late, great Jesse Jackson.
I mean, I think the entire situation is strange. I think even with having the endorsement, doing it right before without like the family coordination is strange after he passed. It just it didn't feel right, doesn't seem right, even if it's legit. Usually when you're rolling out an announcement like that, it's in, the family would be rolling that out for them. And, then they would be amplifying it. So it is a very strange situation. Do I think it has an effect on what is going to happen today? I'm not too sure, but something very strange that I think is not necessarily, crazy for what we see here in Illinois. But yeah, I think we'll
Yeah,
see
there's
what.
there's a lot of Jackson activity in the closing weeks of this campaign. So incumbent Congressman Jonathan Jackson, who represents part of the South Side, said that his father would never make an endorsement when there were two black candidates facing each other. I haven't gone back over the 50 years of Reverend Jesse Jackson to double check that, but it seems true. I can't recall. I think in the high point of the Reverend's political activity, it was always, an insurgent black campaign like Mayor Harold Washington taking on white candidates. So you had one member of the family, prominent member of the family, saying, "My dad would never do this," and then seems like Yusuf, who seems to be kind of filling the role of leading Operation Push, at least for the time being, was a little bit softer in his walking that back. And then you have former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., we used to call him 3J, who had a brief opportunity to do as many Illinois politicians have done, get a chance to go to college for a few years. He's back from college, running to retake his seat. And he may be facing or sitting alongside his ex-wife, who emerged at the 11th hour. She's in the middle of this endorsement thing somehow. And she, according to Politico, is running for the shadow senator position for the District of Columbia, where she is now living. So a lot of Jacksons involved in this election day. But we have to move on. We can't this just can't be the can't wait sounds terrible for Jackson politicians. We have more to cover. So, Eleni, and the Tribune did a nice, typical Tribune late in the game kind of rack up of this whole thing, but it was worth kind of taking the big picture. So all 118 state House seats are on the ballot. 39 of the 59 state Senate seats are up. And I've never seen the amount of political action committees and outside money involved in local Illinois races like I've seen in this one. We've talked previously about AIPAC, the pro-Israeli PAC that's gotten very involved, and the sports books, Patrick, have spent a ton of. So we have DraftKings has a PAC. Meta's involved. We've got PACs representing the crypto bros that are involved. I mean, tens of millions of dollars are being spent on the Illinois General Assembly.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of money being spent for some of these races is astounding, particularly when you see the level of the races, meaning like a state Senate seat or a state House seat, and the level of the spend. But, I think a bigger thing that we are now seeing with these cycles is also the caucuses and the sub caucuses. And so you now just don't have like the Dem caucus and the Republican caucus. Now you have the Mod caucus and the Latino caucus and, all these sub caucuses where money is flowing specifically to those caucuses. And then, how does that, because those blocks, like voting blocks of members, affect so many pieces of legislation in good ways and in bad ways. And so it's just interesting to see just not only how much is being spent, but how they're targeting who they're spending it on.
Patrick, what is the point of these big outside groups like a big online sports book or some of these other organizations to be spending this money on state, hyperlocal state rep races.
I think we're kind of seeing a new political maxim come out. 20 years ago, it would have been said, don't pick a fight with somebody that buys ink by the barrel. And now it's, I think, don't pick fights with people that can fund super PACs at the flip of a switch. And so there's a couple. Illinois likes to pride itself on being at the vanguard of regulation of a handful of industries. And if you're at the vanguard of that regulatory movement, good or bad, you're going to incur some of that. And in this era, it's very easy and legal to create a super PAC and do all that. What I think will be fun in a couple weeks, months, we can take a step back, take a look at some of these tactics and figure out what was good money after bad, what was necessary, how to refine these things. Some of the attacks are, it just sounds like it was written sometimes by someone that's not even close to like the actual candidates involved. And they're trying to tell you like this person eats live rabbits and walks down the street with a loaded weapon or something. You're like, that makes no sense. What are you talking about? So the attacks need to be born in some form of reality. But you poke a bear, you might get your picnic basket stolen.
Well, Eleni, it is. I know you've lived through the era of big donors coming in and trying, relatively late in the game, like at the beginning of a cycle, to weigh in heavy for a candidate or a slate of candidates. And this is maybe the more long-term approach. And we can cover this in the 400 level course. If all of you can pass this course, we'll move on to the 400 level. But if you build your grassroots, you might be able to have people in office for the next 20 years instead of the next 4 years, because you've been electing alders and committeemen and state reps and state senators.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely key. And I think, just seeing the amount of money that's being spent, not now on specific candidates, but on specific issues, right? And then targeting, okay, which politicians, electeds, further that agenda, and blocking those groups of people, electeds, together, as opposed to it just being like aldermen, state senate, state house. It's now like a hodgepodge that you're seeing. Like they're not just focusing on one, group or one government entity. It's a collective effort. And so it's just interesting again to see how the dynamic continues to shift and how I think just involved people are getting in hyper local races.
Now, here's an example of one hyperlocal race that I thought was particularly crazy that the Tribune spent some time on. So, State Rep Margaret Croak represents Lincoln Park. She is not running for re-election as a state rep because she is running for comptroller. And in that race, you've got a political newcomer who's from an immigrant family that owns hotels in the northern suburbs, Kareem Lakhani. He spent hundreds of thousands of his own money, got backed by the Chicago Teachers Union, who's also put some money behind him. He is being challenged by a guy named Paul Kendrick, who's been endorsed by Representative Croak and the Democratic state senators, so a more conventional series of endorsements. He is being backed by Meta. Then you got Mac LeBun, who used to be a national and local, political staffer. His latest role was policy advisor to Mayor Lori Lightfoot. And then you have Litzy Kurasinkle, who is a former local school council chair, Harvard educated, human rights activist. She spent the least of that group, but you put them all together, I bet when all the receipts are in, that's going to be $1 million race. And it also shows that there's some good political staffers working on some of these reps, because there was an oppo drop on Mr. Lakhani that he was actually a college Republican. Now he's running as a Democrat in Chicago, kind of doing the opposite of what normally happens. Normally, you become more conservative as you have something to conserve. Anyway, the point is that district alone is probably going to have $1 million in spending just in this primary, and we're only at the first gate.
And I think there's even more drama going on in that district with the candidate Kendrick that you mentioned, who's now being dinged because he, I believe, may have said some sort of supportive commentary about the big beautiful bill. And now the Illinois Education Association is questioning why they supported him. And so, I mean, this is par for the course when you're at the end of the cycle here where everyone's just throwing everything against the wall and seeing if it sticks. But yeah, it is interesting how hot and contentious these small local races are getting.
Well, good luck to the voters in Lincoln Park to figure that out. We do have a little bit of government to cover, but it also involves the schools and the teachers union. So Mayor Johnson, in his radio interview with WBEZ, said the other day that he may send students to lobby for more money for Chicago schools. So the teachers union wants the mayor and the hybrid school board that the mayor still controls to allow May 1st as a school holiday so the students can participate in a no school, no work, no shopping day. And the mayor said this is part of his longstanding push to, quote, tax major corporations and wealthy Chicagoans. Quote, people all over the country are tired. Working people have had to bear the weight of the sluggish economy while the ultra-rich continue to get richer. Our schools are woefully underfunded. People want more investments. All of that requires a push from working people to challenge the elected leaders. And so the host of the show, hardly a conservative hot talk host, I think a longtime Chicago broadcaster at WBEZ, Sasha Ann Simons, said CPS students already have, much to Eleni's chagrin, Tuesday and Wednesday off this week, all next week for spring break, and then they're off again on April 3rd. And the mayor responded, we can't just sit on our hands and hope and wish. So, and he said that the Reverend Jesse Jackson, again, so Reverend Jackson is going to be invoked whenever there's something edgy that is suggested by anyone in politics for the foreseeable future. He said Reverend Jesse Jackson achieved all that he did with direct action and organizing. So there you have it.
I mean, yeah, today's the Tuesday that's off. Tomorrow's off. Next week we're off. Let's make up some more days. I mean, look, I am fully supportive of what the cause is in its core, but let's be reasonable here. You know, we're all working parents too. And, you know, throwing surprises like that, I understand it's May 1st and it's March 17th, but let's just be reasonable across the board, please. That's all I'm going to say. Don't let me keep going here.
Patrick, will those children have to register as lobbyists?
That's a great question. Do they get a ham sandwich as part of their court? I'm still confused. Are they going to Springfield on May 1st, or they're just taking the day off on May 1st? I'm sorry, I missed a little.
Well,
of
you know,
you
you don't have to go to Springfield to be a lobbyist, as you know.
Well,
in fact, we know lobbyists that spend their time on the golf course.
Well, let's just be clear. May 1st is a Friday. So, I mean, I think the legislature is scheduled to be there anyway, but...
What? Oh, wait, is this actually a ploy by the Chicago Police Department to get a lot of overtime to be called in for the teen takeovers? Because what we really need to do is encourage teens to not be, that's not a problem at all. Spring will just be springing at that time, might have some nice weather. So what we should really do is just have all of the school children not in
It's
school.
it's just a silent protest. But yeah, I suppose it could devolve. It certainly has it certainly has the ingredients.
You know what?
Uh,
We're gonna have to visit this in May 2nd edition. Let's do a special edition and judge the effectiveness of maybe I'm just out of the joke. You know, I'm not young and hip, so maybe I'm missing.
no one has
how this
ever
is.
accused you of that.
That's
But
right.
but Eleni is looking at another day where she's going to have the kids driving her nuts. So we're not going to be taping the podcast on May 1st. It sounds like. So we love in addition to talking politics, we love to keep track of the news media and our friends in the news media and their battles to stay alive and survive. But they've been falling like flies this week. So. Earlier today, the Tribune reported that Jory Luloff, the first woman to anchor a Chicago TV news show, and she talked about all of the nasty comments and treatment she got in the newsroom from her male colleagues who didn't think that she was qualified to be a news anchor, even though she was very well educated and, in fact, spent some time in the CIA before she started a journalism career. Then John Holtman, the first morning news anchor of the all news Chicago News Radio 78, co-hosted for decades the morning news. For many years, he co-hosted with Felicia Middlebrooks, the John and Felicia show. He covered the American Airlines crash, American Airlines Flight 191 at O'Hare in 1979. And then Orion Samuelson died, the voice of God, agribusiness reporter at WGN Radio for decades. He had to interrupt one of his farm reports to report on the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. So 3 journalistic legends. The Newswatch never stops. Neither does terribleness. It's time for Sounds Terrible, Grace. So, Eleni, you got any pent-up terribleness other than the terribleness we've already covered?
Well, I think that ultimately being a voter today is truly terrible. So let's take it outside of candidates, outside of all the political stuff we've been talking about and the campaigning. Just I went to vote and I'm just gonna say it, no interest in the ballot. There's not that
It was meh. You had a meh experience.
yeah, and I had my daughter with. She's 7 now, so I'm like, hey, we're gonna go to the library. I'm gonna show you what this is. So I was trying to explain, and there was this Roden Library, Northwest Side, and it's all elderly election judges. There was nobody in there, which is also alarming. But anyway, I was in there showing her, and so I'm like, this is what this office does, and she's like, okay. So I'm going through the list and I'm like, okay, reading names are your names. And I got to a particular name we will not mention. And my immediate reaction was, well, we're not voting for them. And, and all the election judges started laughing. But that was the most excitement that came out of that voting session. So I hope that we can get back to a point that's in a cycle or two where we get a little more excited about what we're doing here and living here in this state and this country. So yeah.
In this winter, spring too, that we're having, birds are chirping and it's 14 degrees out. Lots of people on St. Patrick's Day are getting hammered, and maybe lots of people are getting hammered instead of voting. And there'll be some candidates getting hammered later when they end up on the losing end of some of these races where there's 9 people running. But what sounds terrible for you, Patrick?
Well, I want to apologize. I hate to miss a monumental birthday. And no, I'm not talking about how we did not honor Eleni correctly on the podcast for her money. I'm not even going to mention it because I'm a gentleman. But I aired last week. I forgot to celebrate the 250th birthday of The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith's pivotal work. 250 years strong. And so to all the butchers, the brewers, and the bakers for whom we have thanks for our dinner, they do not out of benevolence, but of their own self-interest. And so to that invisible hand, 250 years strong, we salute you.
Wow, that was terrible in a number of ways. So
You're welcome.
I was going to talk about the fact that in Springfield, Lenny's former stomping ground, I guess mine as well. I'm just always in denial about that. That Cap Fax announced last week that members of the Illinois General Assembly are forming a Wally's caucus. Now, Wally's never did get around to sponsoring us. I suppose they still have the opportunity. I think it's kind of terrible that with all the problems we have in Illinois that we spend time on the Wally's caucus, although it's a clever ploy by the Illinois Fuel and Retail Association. They're sponsoring an event in a couple of weeks at Boone's Saloon, and it will be the launch of the unofficial Wally's caucus. And it's not the fact that they have an unbelievable selection of jerky. And we talked last week about jerky falling from the sky. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think Wally's has clean bathrooms too and some good swag. But we should have something better to do than form a Wally's caucus. But then I decided that there's something even more terrible to talk about, and that's dad jokes. And I'm a dad, and there are some people here that are, sorely familiar with that. So I was reading one of the community newspapers, still printing against the odds. In fact, the one up in Eleni's neighborhood, the Natick newspaper's Northwest Side Press, which has an off-the-charts police blotter on a weekly basis. But there was also a column by a gentleman named Tom Purcell, and he said, I think this is appropriate, that America needs to get a sense of humor again. It's hard. There's a lot going on. But he cited the late, great former President Reagan, who told the story of a minister and a politician at the gates of heaven meeting St. Peter, who immediately gave the minister a key to a rooming house while he gave the politician the keys to a mansion. And the politician, according to former President Reagan, via Tom Purcell, via the Northwest Side Press, the politician says, "I'm confused. Why does a man of the cloth get such a modest accommodation while I get such opulence?" "Well," says the minister, "we've got millions of ministers up here, but you're the only politician who ever made it." Happy election week, everybody. By the time this podcast is loaded, we may start to know who the winners and losers are. I think we're all losers in some form or fashion, to Eleni's point. And if it's terrible, you've come to the right place. This is Can't Wait. Sounds terrible. For Patrick, Eleni, producer Grace, I'm Dennis. We'll see you next time.